Greetings, gods and goddesses in training. Welcome back to the channel. It is Uncle Makara, all relations. Today we're talking about the key things that channelers need to be aware of when they are channeling. Okay, this is a very important topic, and these are based on 3 analysis that I did of 3 different channelers, and I started to notice some very common patterns between all of them. So essentially, these are 7 critical areas that channelers should be very mindful of if they want to maintain their accuracy, if they want more coherence and authenticity in their transmissions. Okay, so these areas include internal consistency, source discernment, clarity of delivery, and personal bias management. And here are the 7 points that we can start exploring. Okay, the number 1 thing is consistency and logical coherence. So if one part of the channeling states that humanity has absolute free will, but then another part claims that a divine intelligence will ensure humanity does not make destructive choices, this creates a logical paradox, right? And this message should follow a coherent structure. If the Akashic records are described as a passive database in one moment, it shouldn't later be described as a guiding beings who interfere with human decisions. So how do you maintain consistency? If the message changes mid-session, just pause and ask the source for clarification on it. Okay, this is one way that you can manage this. And you keep records of past channelings and compare them for continuity over time. This is something that I've done so I can spot these different discrepancies, whether it's my own ego trying to facilitate something or have some hidden agenda. I know it because I can call it out in that moment. And then of course the last thing is to ask questions that test the consistency of the entity's responses. Number 2, be very cautious of imposters or conflicting entities or false light beings. Just because an entity presents itself like the Akashic records or some kind of benevolent ascended master doesn't always mean that it actually is. Some lower vibrational beings may mimic higher sources to spread misinformation and to distort your messages, okay? So challenge the entity with 3-dimensional questions. What is the law of one? You could ask it. You know, are you operating under divine will and service to others? Who is your master? You know, these types of questions really call it out. And you got to compare messages with those from trusted spiritual sources and really pay attention to the tone. Higher dimensional beings do not use vague mysticism, superiority. They don't even use fear, okay? They don't use these dystopic doomsday narratives. They don't even step into that because they know how much our minds are malleable by that kind of stuff, right? They're not even going to go there. Number 3, filtering personal bias. This is tough to do, you know, avoiding injecting personal beliefs into your message. Some channelers unknowingly project their own worldview into the information they receive. For instance, if a channeler personally dislikes AI, they may unconsciously interpret a neutral message about AI as negative or dystopian. And so how do we reduce bias? When receiving a message, you act as a neutral translator rather than an interpreter, okay? So that means that you are not filtering yourself so much, but also you're asking yourself, is this message something that I personally believe in, or does it surprise me? Now, if the information feels too aligned with personal views, maybe scrutinize it a little bit more deeply, okay? And maybe work with a peer or a trusted mentor, or maybe even another channeler to cross-check messages for bias. Then we have avoiding overgeneralization and vagueness, okay? So beware of messages that lack substance. Some channel messages rely on broad feel-good language, like love will heal all things, without offering any kind of new or actionable insights. So messages that echo in spiritual cliches without depth may not actually be coming from some kind of a higher intelligence. If you're really saying that a higher intelligence is spewing these simplistic feel-good bumper stickers, then I don't know what to tell you. How to enhance clarity and depth. You want to ask the source to be specific. How exactly does this work? Can you give a historical example of this? What are practical ways to apply this knowledge? So challenging vague questions, and I think Ryan G does this pretty well, It requests details, dates, mechanics of things. And then you can start to really understand the message, okay? So compare your information with other reputable channelers to see if the core message still aligns. Next thing I would say is energy hygiene and protection. Avoid channeling without grounding or protection, because some entities can drain energy and create very distorted messages. So if you ever feel drained, confused, or physically unwell, you may not have been channeling a high frequency being. So set an intention before the session. I call upon only the highest beings of love and truth. Use protective practices like energetic shielding or visualization. And if something feels off, just stop the session. Just pause, stop the session, recalibrate before continuing. Number 6, differentiating channeling from intuition or imagination. So try and avoid assuming that all internal messages are channeling. Sometimes what a person perceives as channeling is actually higher intuition or subconscious thoughts. So some messages come through as mental impressions rather than direct dictation. Channeling often has a distinct rhythm, vocabulary, or energetic signature that feels different from normal thoughts. Intuitive thoughts may feel like an internal knowing, whereas true channeling often feels like an external guidance flowing through you, okay? So when in doubt, ask for validation through synchronicities or external confirmations, okay? And lastly, the ethical responsibility of channeling, okay? Now, avoid spreading fear or absolute predictions. Saying that there will be no more war ever or AI will definitely be destructive makes absolute claims that may or may not be true. So channelers must be careful not to implant their own fear-based programming to their audiences. I think this is really key and actually very, very important for us to do. So how do we ensure this kind of ethical channeling? We've got to stick to empowering and more insightful information rather than doom and gloom and dystopian narratives. If a channeled message is predicting some major event, phrase it in a way that acknowledges probabilities rather than fixed outcomes, and encourage critical thinking. I think good channelers invite questions rather than demanding belief. These are some final thoughts on this topic. Becoming a high integrity channeler means you gotta be credible and you gotta maintain consistency. Don't let different channeling sessions contradict each other. Discern the source. Not all beings presenting themselves are higher intelligence or benevolent. Filter personal bias. Make sure that the messages are pure, not influenced by your own worldview. Seek specificity, so avoid being vague or adding mystical language that lacks depth. Protect your energy, use spiritual hygiene before and after channeling. Distinguish between intuition and channeling, like making sure the message is external, not just an internal thought. And stay ethical and responsible, right? Avoid these fear or rigid predictions and just stay on track, okay? So by integrating these awareness practices, you can definitely refine your ability and bring forth more authentic, valuable, and transformative messages. I'm kind of just getting over this ascension flu right now, and I would much rather focus on my own healing today. Let's get it. Upward Spiral Gang, may we never be the same again. Thank you so much for tapping in. Let's go, Archangel Gang Gang. Let's go. What's up?